Welcome to the Death and All the Rest podcast, where we discuss life, death, and everything in between. On today's episode, we're just going to start with talking about what existential dread means.
Correct. And I am going to read the APA Dictionary of Psychology's definition of existential dread, which it describes as a profound, deep-seated psychic or spiritual condition of insecurity and despair in relation to the human condition and the meaning of life. What does that mean?
What does it mean?
Well, we have two very different experiences of this. For me, I'm actually looking forward to death, frankly. I remember not wanting to be alive at a very young age. I didn't know it was suicidal, but 5-7 years of age, I knew I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to participate in this world. And I kind of have a craving that's in the background of my mind that has gone on my entire life for oblivion. I like sleep. I don't want to be conscious, frankly. I will still defend my life, and I definitely feel the biological imperative to fight to survive. And whatever this impulse is in me, or this kind of background default setting that I have spent a great deal of my life struggling with. It's probably related to addiction, or has impacted upon my feelings of addiction and my behavior. And now I basically have gotten, I think, fairly good at managing it and staying alive. But probably when I get to the end of my life, if I have a moment, I'm probably going to be like, hell yeah, let's go.
It's wild to think so young, 5 or 7 years old, that you're just thinking like, man, I don't want to be here.
It's true. Yeah. I kind of thought about it as like, I don't want to participate. I don't want to play this game. I don't know if that is kind of like my family system. It was a very difficult family dynamic. And I'm kind of a black sheep in my family in some ways. And that became my worldview. But I do remember that. Very strong feelings around it. Not so much as very strong memories. That's kind of how my life is. You know, I don't remember things well, but I remember the feelings very strongly.
Totally. Do you think too, because that's starting at such a young age, I imagine, like, even though there's obviously like a different amount of just cognition around that at 5 or 7 than there is as you get older and older, but like I suspect that lends to a lot of, like you said, how just the addiction and things like that, but like in terms of when we're talking about existential dread, the way that we're defining it here, right, like this struggle and this meaning and trying to figure out the point of life or why we're here and what we're doing, like how do you think starting having those feelings at such a young age, how do you think that that's just contributed to the way that you've functioned in life overall?
I mean, I think it's kind of everything. I think I have a very black and white view of the world. As certainly when I was younger, I did. I just thought I have a very bleak outlook on everything. I just thought we're just fucked. I just never believed in anything. I never felt spiritual. I thought religion or mysticism or anything like that, you know, ritual, I just thought it was all a crock. And I never had any faith in our systems, in our institutions, in our heroes, our role models. I just kind of, I discounted everything. And that was not to my benefit because, and it was rough to be around. Yeah. I was a tough person to be in the same room with because I would suck the energy out of the room because I was just, you know, very negative. So I think that's all part of it, certainly. And I think that's why I drank as much as anything. But how do I break that apart or tease that apart? Or figure out how that interacts with like depression and ADHD and trauma? I don't know. I'm not quite sure. But that's
Yeah.
how I conceptualize life.
I could totally see too how that would perpetuate more and more of the existential dread, because like even if the baseline is, I don't have faith in this stuff, I don't believe in this stuff, I don't feel connected to this stuff, there's an isolation that kind of
Mm-hmm.
comes from that, and there's this lack of hope or optimism or whatever you want to call it driving it forward. And then yeah, I could see that just feeling more and more like I don't fucking care about being here.
It made me very unproductive.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't care about a career. I didn't have life goals at all. I was like, man, I'll be out of here by the time I'm 27. I was like on my list. I'll be at the 27 club. And then that doesn't happen, you just keep on living unless you do in fact die. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
shit, this
Mm-hmm.
just keeps going. And it actually, none of this gets truly, I don't think, easier. I think it continues to be difficult. Consciousness
Mm-hmm.
and this sort of dread of living and dread of death. And as your body's and your brain ages, you feel maybe that you're losing what control you did have. Although maybe the opposite is true too, and I'll run out of fucks to give when I get a little bit older,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll just be like whatever, because then you don't have to feel like you're pressured to be perfect. You're over the hump of life, and you can just kind of relax. I know some people do experience something like that.
Yeah. Some freedom in that.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because like you said, you didn't care about a career. You weren't going to live long enough to have one. But then you had this really like high powered career for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, when I was in the shipping industry in the Port of Long Beach, and I was a corporate executive, and I ran 3 different offices, and I had a bunch of type A guys working for me, and it was very high risk, high reward, uh, very stressful job. And that's actually what kept my interest, because I had all that stress and all that responsibility. And I was very successful for a while until the wheels started to come off. And I think that was partially just the fact that I was living a fight or flight kind of existence. My background stress level was very high.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm older and I've been outside of that career and then found myself kind of replicating it in different ways, I worked in security, I worked as a 911 dispatcher and on a search and rescue team. Like, I think maybe there's a little bit of a craving for that as well,
Mm-hmm.
because it gives me, I can't do a 9 to 5 job. I just check the hell out. I'm not going to move widgets and data across the screen because I just won't play. I'll be very unsuccessful. And now that I'm a sobriety coach and getting my licensed addiction counselor certificate, that's high value. That's also high risk and reward, and that's high connection,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very personal.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of is probably a healthier, more positive way for me to live. And I think maybe I'm kind of flailing my way towards a better way of dealing with life, or just kind of aging into it and trial and erroring to it.
Yeah, hell yeah, we all are, I think.
Hopefully.
It's cool though, because like I see a connection in that. Even as you're saying it, it's different variations, different levels of what that looks like. But there's something, and I don't know if you've thought about this or not. I suspect you have because I know how your brain works. But like, there's something to you, and maybe this is part of that existential piece of like finding meaning, finding purpose, something being valuable. Like, okay, if I have to be here, there has to be like high stakes,
Mm-hmm.
and in different ways, right? Like you've done that in ways where when you were in the shipping industry, and that was you were living in a way that was so misaligned with who you are and how you want to be now, but it was high stakes. It kept you in it. And then now you're talking about like the addiction counseling stuff, and that, like you just said, that's high stakes too. That's important in a different way. And I would just love to hear you speak to that difference in like these being high stakes situations, careers that you're involved in, but in such a different way. Like how does that resonate with your central nervous system, with your values?
I mean, I think that's it. Like, I got into that career because I couldn't find anything else, and it fell into my lap. My next door neighbor was doing that, and I needed a job, and I just quit my other job and started there immediately. And I just did it without fully being conscious about what was going on. One, I was drinking, so I probably wasn't a really good reporter on my own life, but it gave so much structure, that high stakes, that stress. And I was so able to focus and be involved in my life. And I got off on it. I got off on the power. I got off on the control. I got off on being like the guy in a crisis. Because that was my biggest strength. Like I could think my way through problems and deal with like very difficult moments and come up with novel solutions to it. So I guess I was probably just craving it. But it was also killing me. It was driving me into the alcoholism even harder. And the stress level was so high. I didn't sleep 2 days a week, Sunday and Monday night, for about 9 years. And I would pass out from just exhaustion. My stomach would be burning with acid from the stress, racing thoughts. And sometimes I would just drink myself till I passed out. And then that got worse and worse and worse. So after I moved on from that, intentionally left and because I knew it was going to kill me and the alcohol was going to kill me. And I just ended up recreating it. And I finally had that moment of that epiphany, that realization of what was going on. I started to have some aspect of control. The recognition was the first tool to apply control. And then since then, I've gotten better as I pick jobs and careers and move through my life at finding stuff that doesn't wreck me, doesn't keep me in that fight or flight zone as much. And it gives me time to rest and time to process and then rest. Because, you have the heightened state and then you have to come down from it, but you're not quite resting. You're just kind of transitioning. And then you can rest and then you can go and do the next thing. So I went from working, at that Norton Lilly at 60, 80, 100 hours a week. And now it's 20, 25 hours a week. But it took years to get there, like 7 years to get there. So, but it's much healthier because I have so much more time in my life for doing things that are beneficial to my health, like self-care and diet, exercise, sleep, all that stuff that I always harp upon. And in the process of going down this path, I've achieved a lot of balance. And I think I've fixed something and then I moved on and fixed the next thing and I moved on and fixed the next thing. It just doesn't end, which is good. I'm fine with that. I'm kind of am on a voyage of discovery, which is great. I'm happy with that. But yeah, I'm always about I want the big win. I want the meaning and the intentionality and the purpose in life. And I talk about this with the people I work with. That we're desperate for that in this life now because we don't believe in shit. It's not just me. We're very jaded as a species now. We have no faith in most of this stuff. And unfortunately, a lot of that problem, that loss of faith, that disillusionment is well grounded. Our institutions and our heroes and our leaders and our planet, because of our poor stewardship, appears to be failing on some levels, many levels.
Yeah, we've been rocked.
We've been rocked. Yeah.
It's really, hearing you talk, and I know your story, right? We've talked about this plenty of times, but hearing it in this setting when we're talking about it somewhat linearly, there's this fascinating concept throughout that, when you were doing the shipping industry job and you were grinding out and you said, I was good in a crisis. I was that guy. I had the power. I could do all the things. People would come to me. But the crisis in your own life was going to the wayside. But then now the way that you're living life now, you're not living in a state of crisis that you're managing all the time. And it's almost, I'm hearing it as this, whether it was a distraction in your career before to not focus on the personal element of it, or if it was because of what the career was, you couldn't focus on the personal element. But it seems like that switch over has been huge, and just like changing the lifestyle has made it to where like managing your own personal realm of crisis is more doable, more feasible.
Yeah, I've recentered myself
Yeah.
instead of like trying to get rid of myself or distract myself, like you said. Yeah, you can't. It's just your problems don't go anywhere. Your conscious pain doesn't go anywhere. It's just colluded and clouded by other experience, but it's still right there.
Mm-hmm.
No
Yep.
bueno. All right. Now it's your turn.
So my existential dread, like this is what I think is really cool about existential dread, and the point of why we're even having a podcast to talk about it, because it's not just this one thing, this concept that relates, and this is how everybody experiences it. Because what you just talked about is the opposite of what my existential dread, how it presents for me and across my lifetime. And I mine goes two ways. So and they totally play into each other, but they're two very different presentations of existential dread. So, on the one hand, ever since I was like 9 years old, I've had extreme existential dread. And it started, when I was choking and wasn't breathing, and everything was going dark, and my mom hit me, and it became dislodged. But from there on, there's just like it just awakened this really wild, as a 9-year old, it's hard to think about this idea of death and like what comes after, and really getting existential in that. And it's continued across my lifetime, and it was a huge source of anxiety, especially throughout like teen years and stuff. But for me, the existential dread is it is a huge fear of dying. And it's not even about like how I'll die or what'll happen to me. Like, that's a little bit scary in its own right, because you just don't want to suffer, sure. But it's the what comes after. And this kind of feeds into what you were saying earlier too, about like the faith and the lack of faith. And I don't believe that something comes after. And I don't say that to be dismissive of people who do believe in that. I actually think that's beautiful, and I wish I could believe that. But belief is just that, right? Like, you feel it or you don't. It's real or it's not. And I don't. And with that, there's this idea that what comes after is just not existing. You just cease to exist. Consciousness is gone. And that is so fucking scary. Like, I just, and when it really starts to get meta, is like getting caught up in the thought of like, you can't fathom being nothing because you don't know what it is to be nothing. Like, our brain, even trying to get there, can't. We just can't do that. So on the flip side of that, on the second direction of my existential dread, is this feeling, and I get caught up in every so often, of wishing I had never been born. Wishing that this never happened. Because had it not, I wouldn't care, right? I wouldn't be invested in it. I wouldn't have something that I know what it is to lose and be so afraid of losing it. It's like you can't miss what you never had. And I go through that of like, yeah, I think I would have rather just been atoms and energy cruising through the universe, however was happening before it piled into this meat sack that I am today, and created consciousness, and I wouldn't have to ponder all these things. But with that, like, there's pros and cons to existential dread, and one of the big pros for me is I'm constantly trying to reroute myself to be in the moment and be focusing on what I'm doing and what's making me happy and what gives me value and meaning and purpose and fulfillment and all that good stuff, in big and small ways. Like, just enjoying the little moments when I'm at home with my cats and with my husband, and just like, being able to be in that, and not trying to get too far ahead, because this is what I've done for a really long time, and getting too far ahead into, but what's the fucking point? Because it's not going to matter when I'm dead. I won't remember any of this. That'll trip me up. And I still get caught on that sometimes. I can't act like I don't. But like, it's really to center myself and to ground. I have to come back down to like, it's very mindful. This is what I'm living in now, and this is what I have now. So getting caught up in the anxiety of it is almost, it's increasing my suffering, because then I'm losing the moments that I even have while I'm here that I find so precious and valuable, and I'm letting them slip through my fingers because I'm worried about when I'm not here inevitably one day. So I try to pull it back and just focus on like getting the most out of the moment and forward thinking in like not too far out, but just like where do I want to be in a year? Like what would I really like to be doing so I can be building towards that and not losing the thread of like building a life that I really want, but not getting so far out that now I'm tripped up about all the rest of it. And you said something about how like when you are finally dying one day, you're going to be like, yes. And I so hope I get to that point too. Like when I see these videos of like these elderly women on Instagram and stuff where they're like, just like, I'm done with this. I can't wait to be there. I'm like, yeah, I hope I get like that too. Like I hope I reach that point of just acceptance one day.
So, if I'm hearing you right, the the exact existential dread for you is sounds like it's a powerful feeling, and you didn't reason your way into it at all, but
No.
it's logic and technique and intellectual um, behaviors and controls that help you navigate it.
Yeah, and sometimes they don't, right? Like sometimes those same things, the logic and the reasoning, are actually the things that make it impossible to navigate in a moment. And the anxiety takes over. I actually was just doing this training yesterday about the connection between anxiety and panic and our amygdala versus our cortex, and how anxiety, because our amygdala is what actually makes us feel anxious, but the cortex can send the messaging to the amygdala depending on like what's happening. Sometimes if it's just like a fear response or an anxiety response, it's just the amygdala because that's the emotion center. But for me, in these cases, it's like it's the logic and the thought process first that's like, oh, it's lending to these thoughts of I will die and not exist one day, and then it creates this panic and anxiety, and so it's the same thing that helps is sometimes the same thing that hurts.
Yeah. Contemplation versus rumination.
Yeah, yeah, and having the responsibility to move yourself out of that because nobody else can and nothing else can, right? Like once it's your mind that's going and it's your emotions that are going, the train leaves the station and there's no conductor that can pull those brakes besides you. So you have to be able to like stop that thought somewhere. And that's been a lot of practice because when that thought starts at 9 years old, that's not necessarily something that you have any kind of skills to do. And nobody around me knew what to do. Nobody understood. And it's not even that long ago, 25 years ago, but even then therapy wasn't the way that it is now. It's much more normalized now than it was when I was 9. And I remember for years I dissociated and I didn't know that. I didn't know what it was. Nobody knew what it was. But I would tell my mom, like, I don't feel like I'm in my body. I feel like I'm watching it. I can see everything that I'm doing, but I don't feel like I'm actually here doing it. Like, I feel like I'm kind of overlooking and just watching it all happen. And I think it made my mom nervous. And she would just say, oh, it's hormones. You're prepubescent, a teenager, whatever, it's hormones. And I was like, oh, okay. She was just trying to calm me down and didn't know what to actually say. But it helped in those moments because it made me go, okay, well, I'm not crazy. I'm not actually like out of my body and watching this all happen. But yeah, in hindsight, when I found out about dissociation as an adult, I was like, oh shit, that's what was happening. I was in such a state of constant distress and anxiety that I had to dissociate from reality all the time to be able to like keep pushing through because I didn't have skills to manage it.
Yeah. You brought up a good point, or I think something that we should discuss
Mm-hmm.
is I I was a bitter, angry, very negative, highly critical individual, and everybody could see that, and depressed. Did and you just mentioned your mom. Did people recognize this fear, this existential dread in you? Was that something that somebody from the outside saw in you? Oh, like that's Bree.
Oh yeah, for sure. Cause like, well, when the choking thing happened too, like I actually for almost 3 years barely ate. Like I ate enough to stay alive, but I wouldn't like I would eat SpaghettiOs. I would eat like half a can a day because it would slide down your throat. There was very low risk of choking. Everything was calculated. Everything had to be like, what's the likelihood that I'd choke on that would get stuck. And I had to eat in my room because I could not stand sitting at my kitchen table with my family and them watching me. So my mom would let me go eat in my room. A lot of it, my mom would make me like chew my food and spit it out, even if I couldn't tolerate eating it, to try to get some nutrients. So they knew I was highly anxious, and there was, I mean, I was little. 9, like I don't think about 9-year-olds, like I was little. So there would be so many times that I'd be like crawling up into my mom and dad's bed, crying about, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Like, and I was actually raised religious. We went to church every Sunday, me and my siblings and my mom, and it's still like I was unconvinced that that was a safety net in any capacity. Like that didn't feel like it was helping with the death anxiety at all. And I remember being that young and like my parents trying to like say like, you're not gonna die from eating, right? And I was like, yeah, no. And I remember as I got older, like I moved out of religion when I was 12, and as I got older, my mom would say to me like, I wish that I could just make you believe in God, in heaven, the way that I do, because I think it would make life so much easier for you. And I said, it would. You're so right. Like, it would absolutely make this so much easier on me. But like I said to you, that's not what belief is, right? Like, I can't just believe it because you wish I did. And it doesn't make sense to me. And my dad used to always say, but it does, I don't know why you spend your time worrying about dying, because it's going to happen and you can't do anything about it. And I was like, but that doesn't help either, right? Like, that doesn't help either, because like, yes, it's inevitable. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm on the train and I'm darting towards it. At some point it's going to happen. And you're right. I can do nothing to stop it because we all die. That is just fact. It's the one guarantee that we get in life. But that didn't help. And I think like they were coming from this place of trying to help ease the anxiety. Oh, believe in this, have some faith, or hey, you can't, worrying about it's not going to do anything, so just drop it. And it's like, none of it helped. Like, it just made me a walking ball of anxiety all the time. But yeah, my whole family knew that there was a constant thing. I was up a lot. I had trouble sleeping all throughout high school, college. Like, because most nights I was up flipping in bed and just like spiraling on what it would mean to not exist.
Like afraid you were going to die in your sleep or something?
No, I mean, sometimes, sure. Like, sometimes that would be the thing. But it just, like, it would be that when you try to go to sleep and you can't shut your brain off, the thing that I couldn't shut off, like, I'd be in bed and it would all be fine and I'd be trying to go to sleep. But the thing that wouldn't shut off is it's like you're going to die one day. And when you die one day, this is what that's going to mean. And then when you're trying to go into a state of, like, unconscious, and all you're thinking about is not being conscious at all ever again, I think it just like compounds the fear, and I couldn't get out of it. And I would stay up for hours just tossing turning every night for years, for a very long time.
So, although from my understanding, you didn't have any addiction issues, but this has impacted your health.
Oh sure, yeah, in some big ways, because I was severely underweight. I was 12 years old and I weighed 57 pounds. Like, I was significantly underweight as a kid. And now as an adult, honestly, like, I recently got diagnosed with arthritis in my knees that's pretty degenerated. The doctor was like, you're really young to have this amount of degeneration in your knees. And I was like, I can't help but to think the lack of nutrition at a really vital age, my like prepubescent and teen years, is when I was really missing that probably contributed. My mom she took me to the doctor, and the doctor tried a scare tactic, and she was like, if you don't eat, you'll die. And I was like, but if I do eat, I'll die. So I'll take my chances. Like, I'm still alive. So you are wrong so far. But yeah, I was compromising my health all along, and it wasn't intentional, right? Like, it was a safeguard. I was trying to protect myself from the thing I was afraid of. But in the long run, it made it really hard. It impacted my health a lot.
Yeah. So much of our lives appear to have been, or the course of our lives appears to have been directed by a response to how we felt about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's no answer. There's no final answer.
No, because none of us can know.
No. Although some people are selling it.
Yeah, that's true.
Or they want to enforce it, or their version on others as well.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because I've been really rigid in my thinking around dying, and this is something that was challenged in my own therapy by my therapist, because he was like, "But you don't know what happens." The same way that you say no one knows, like, you know, and the people who believe in heaven and stuff don't know, and he's like, "You don't know," like, and I was like, "Yeah, no, you're right. I acknowledge I don't know. It seems most likely." But he was like, "But that's fine. But hold that. The fact, like, hold a little bit of gray area sometimes, because getting so caught in this black and white, it's this or it's that, is just making the anxiety worse. And then it's impacting quality of life, right? We know when we're so highly anxious, and especially like living in a state of distress where you're dissociating for 10 years of your life, like, that is taking a toll on your health, on your overall longevity. So, like, being able to step out of the things that I think I know, or that I believe so strongly that I feel like is the truth, is, and not just related to this, like, this is a concept for me in so many ways, but like allowing for there to be gray area to say, like, there could be something different that I just don't know about, or that I don't necessarily understand or believe or whatever.
Yeah. It's strange. We go in opposite directions. And I'm not saying this is horseshoe theory, but I have found that accepting and embracing the unknown has been a big, big benefit to me. I very rigid thinking, you know, I was hardcore atheist. I would say probably nihilist, and even anti-natalist, like, don't have kids. It gives you no way out. It gives you no possibility for hope. And recognizing that I'm not God, I don't have all the answers. This isn't all on me. We are a very tiny little speck in a very large universe. There is definitely more out there than I can conceive of, or anybody else. So there is room for mystery. There is room for the unknown. I found that, like, very soothing.
Yeah, and you just said, like, that little bit of hope that it gives you to just say you don't know. Like, that little bit of hope matters. Like, that is what we need to latch onto.
Yeah, because there's room, and there's movement, and there's rest, and there's possibility, and there's, like, well, that'll get me through tomorrow, and all that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Helps us keep moving forward. You know, with that, our goal for these podcast episodes is going to be introduce different topics and talk about different things that will relate to existential dread in some capacity, because it's just life discussions, right? Like, but also making sure that we're ending the episodes with some kind of skills or strategies or tips or things to help people with the concepts that we're talking about. And today we're just chipping away at the very tip of the iceberg. So there's not going to be a lot of that, but I hope that anybody who listens to this episode can hear their strategies, and just even what we've discussed, and how we've learned to manage and navigate our own existential dread. Like, you being here day in and day out, despite not really caring to be here a lot of the time, you know, and figuring that out, and me feeling sometimes I get so bogged down by the end result of it all, but really having to find ways to pull back, stay present, and focus on that. So there are ways to manage this, and, you know, we'll crack that nut in future episodes for sure, to start sharing that with people who might be in similar boats to us and experiencing existential dread in their own way. You know, these are not the only ways that people experience existential dread. And it's one of those concepts that the gist of it is the same, right? It's the what you said, that APA definition, but man, the way that it comes across for everybody is so different, and in waves, right? Like there are some people like you and I who we're gonna feel this day in and day out for the rest of our lives because this is just how we function, and there are some people that there's just certain things that are going to cause spikes in existential dread when there's loss happening in their own lives, or big decisions or transitions, or the aging where there starts to be a decrease in certain functioning. Like so many different things that pop up across a lifetime that may not cause lifelong existential dread the way it has in us, but you know, it'll make the cameo appearances for everybody at some point.
Yeah, and that could even be harder because if they have a dark period in their life and they have no experience with it previously, they can think, oh man, I'm really screwed over here, instead of, and we actually have some skills how to navigate this.
Yeah, so jarring for someone who's just dropping into it versus people who have lived with it for the majority of their lives. And I think that's where we can kind of come in and step in and help people with, because we have such extensive experience dealing with it, we can help support and guide that a little bit for these people so it feels less jarring, because man, it sucks. It's a difficult experience. It's hard to navigate, and it puts everything in question. And like you just said, if they haven't been through that before, it's just like, damn, there's no way through this, but there is a way through it.
Well, yeah, it's like this conflict with end of life and living or dying, and you're stuck in that conflict. It compromises the living part.
Yep.
So then you just walking through your life shooting yourself in the foot the entire time, unintentionally.
Yeah.
And sometimes intentionally.
Yeah.
Or through our choices. So being cognizant of it, and then maybe keeping a door open to other possibilities, is maybe that's the big concept, step one, for how to deal with this thing.
Yep, step one. And we can
Cool.
leave listeners with that today.
Okay, I think that's good.
Sorry for our abrupt ending, everyone. In these first few episodes, we were still honing in our outro, thanks to feedback from our previewing audience. So in the future, hopefully you won't feel like these end like The Sopranos did. But for now, we just want to say thank you for joining us on Death and All the Rest and exploring all things existential with us. We look forward to future episodes that you can join us for.